Welcome back to Driving with Wander and Wonder. I was walking around on a particularly beautiful day like today, where everything is lush in bloom, the sun is low, gold in the sky, all the colors are very saturated, and I realized that I was in a certain state of mind which I would consider sensitive to beauty. I often find myself desensitized to, things that are, one could make a claim for, objectively beautiful. You see a master work, you see, an absolute, some things are overwhelmingly beautiful, so much so that you can't do anything but just be amazed by it, be in awe of it. Awesome. But I've often found myself in positions where I just can't really feel the beauty around me. And I could talk about now the sensitivity to beauty as a threshold, almost like there's a, I can't remember what that's called, but there's the opening and closing of the camera lens to let in more light, more detail. Almost feels as though that consciousness, awareness, particularly vision, like in this case, but you can perceive beauty in many ways. Like you can perceive auditory beauty, there are good smells. I think smell is one of the best indicators for whether or not a person is pathological or not, because there are certain smells that objectively are bad, like they make you run. Refer to my Many Crows of Woodstock, Ontario video. I literally am surrounded by a bunch of absolutely disgusting dead birds, and all you can smell is the rot of their corpses and their shit, which has just completely polluted the area. This is a couple years ago in winter, but yeah, so we can have fun little arguments in terms of like, oh, what's the more beautiful song, or what's the most beautiful painting, but I believe that there are just like there are bad smells, there are bad songs, there are bad pieces of art, and it's a little bit more subtle, it's a little bit more nuanced. We think in the beginning was the word, because that's what the text says, that's what's implanted. Maybe we can think of that as like, okay, the first sense must have been hearing, or sound was the first. But I don't know, like with how nuanced sound is, it'd be interesting to think in the beginning was the fragrance, or in the beginning was the odor. It just seems the most primal, the most survivalistic. Like you smell rot, leave. There is no question. There is morbid fascination sometimes, that's where we can begin to talk about pathologies involving morbid fascination. I'm sure there are pathologies surrounding people that like weird smells. You got weird guys sniffing girls' armpits. You get, there's just, I know it's out there. I know people pay money for weird things. I know it's out there. Don't have to get into what it is, but I know that people are out there doing that, and that is not normal, in my opinion. That's why we dismiss it as, we don't dismiss it, but we analyze it. We take a good gander at it, and we decide, we hypothesize that it's fucking pathological. It's fucking crazy. Why are people doing it? It's weird, man. But yeah, there are songs, and I could think the same about noise music. Like some music's just meant to be bad. It's meant to be a sensory experience, to challenge what the art form is allowed to be. You can create a harsh noise soundscape, and that's fucking awesome. It may not be good, but it's not supposed to be good. That was never the point for it to be beautiful. The point was to expand the idea of what an art form really is, to see art as something which occupies sensory space, whether it's a painting for a single moment or a song over time. We can involve this dimension of time with the sensory experience, so we can create art. But yeah, to expand upon what the idea of art really means is, strangely similar to the types of sensory experience which, when enjoyed, could be considered pathological. So does that make you a weird dude for enjoying something which was never meant to be good? You know, should we enjoy something just for the sake of it being different? And this is the first letter, one of the concepts in the first letter in Franz Kafka's Letters to Milena. He writes when he's on vacation that you know, wherever he is, it's raining, and you know, he still kind of sees the charm in it because it's new, it's novel, and you know, but should we really appreciate something just because it's novel? You know, I think that we have to really we have to have a thorough examination of any concept, of any experience, of any idea before we can decide whether it's good or not. Just because it's new and exciting doesn't mean necessarily that it's good. And you know, we have a lot of people right now really truly excited about chastity, about being chaste, not fetishizing chastity. I'm talking about literally like people who are, you know, pumped to stay a virgin, or like pumped to fucking pumped to like not be okay, one sec. We're gonna do part two. We're gonna do part two in a sec. All right, part two here. So what we were talking about was whether one should consider something that is novel or new as good, just for, you know, the sake of it being new and exciting, and how sometimes that can create, well, this is what I was just thinking for a moment, sometimes how that can create almost a reactionary pendulum type effect in the status quo, one of my favorite concepts. But as we can see, society shifting from more of a generally perceived right wing to more of a generally perceived left wing, there we can see another reactionary movement forming. And you know, there have been several reactionary movements. We could even say that the hippies in the 60s were a reactionary movement to the really kind of, I guess they would say, droll, boring, cookie cutter style society that everything was in the 1950s. But what we can see happening right now as a reaction to ultra-leftist secularism, you know, the belief in science, lab coats, and everything, you know, the world is what they tell us it is. Very similar worldview to those who subscribe to the view of the church fathers for a very long time. We can see a reactionary movement forming that is a return to tradition. And you know, that is the meme, return to tradition. We would all like to think that the grass is always greener on the other side, and that what we had before, you know, when in hindsight, when we look back at it, we have what I would imagine to be a romanticized view of the past, and whether or not things were better, we don't actually know for ourselves, and we are willing to, at least in thought, we are at least willing to consider that maybe things were better, because we are looking at things that are new and exciting to some, which they consider good, and who knows what, maybe it's just there's so much novelty, it's a new thing, maybe this is awesome, but there are a lot of things that we don't know the long-term consequences of, and we can watch the long-term consequences pan out over the course of several years in our society, and we can understand it simply by virtue of observing where things were and what is now and how they compare. So I think that there is an act of affection on the senses, that is to say, that one's own sense, and we could go back to the original concept of sensitivity to beauty, one's own sense of beauty is perturbed by the status quo, and the status quo being imposed by culture, which is opposed to nature, not necessarily insofar as they are rivals, but insofar as they have yet to be reconciled, and they exist at the same time as you know, comorbid entities. They don't have to be morbid, it's just they're in, you know, synthesis with each other, whatever that word is, synergistic. Yeah, I do believe that the status quo affects our ability to perceive what is beautiful, and we can see a certain sense of you know, interesting being brought to the forefront of, we'll take architecture as an art form. We could see like if something is interesting is more important than it being beautiful. And I think that we as a civilization, as a species, observed some objectively beautiful forms, but the people who are learning about these forms in art school have grown very tired of them. And I think that that type of person's perception of what is beautiful has been affected by what they have learned, what they've been exposed to. And whereas the normal person, you cannot escape architecture as an art form. It is imposed on you, whereas a normal person is not really exposed to that much classical, beautiful architecture. Perhaps the art school student is. Perhaps what they are perceiving is, in fact, just so passe. Just like how a musician can listen to AC/DC and be like, oh my God, cringe, dude. Fucking get over AC/DC. So we really have to keep in mind that every single person has a unique experience. We are undergoing constant transformation as individuals. And, we are really just trying to feel our way out because who can you trust anymore? Probably not me either, but that's food for thought. That's Wandered Wonder. Have a good one.